Thanks, Julie.
Good morning and welcome to AFP's post-COVID webinar. I'm delighted to introduce myself, Julie Summerall, AFP Director and your host for today. My colleagues James Pestle, who's also an AFP Director, Paul Hollick, AFP Chairman, and importantly our presenters today, Duncan Webb from ISS and Sean Ayton from Water Windscreens. Before we begin the presentations, I'd like to advise you that we'll be recording this webinar to allow members to review content at a later stage, and that we have a Q&A session following our presentations. Our first presentation today is from Duncan Webb, Head of Fleet at ISS, who's going to look at a range of issues affecting fleets at the moment and talking about his experiences of dealing with them. Over to you, Duncan.
Lovely, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just an introduction for myself. I'm Duncan Webb, Head of Fleet at ISS, covering UK and Ireland. Wanted to talk about our experiences in both a business and fleet context in handling COVID, and also what maybe is still to come as a result of the restrictions and the future in relation to that. So firstly, though, just a bit of background on ISS so people understand the company that I'm talking about. So if I could go on the next slide, please. ISS is a global integrated facilities company with a particular specialisation in global cleaning. So globally, we employ 440,000 people. 40,000 of them being in the UK. And our mantra is to connect people and places to make the world a better place. So in the main, we're a business-to-business company, core services across cleaning, workplace, fluid and technical support into the workplace. And we do that through both direct delivery and managed solutions. We operate in 4 main regions across the globe, and the UK and Ireland make up about 10% of the people and about 20% of the revenue of the UK. Next slide, please. In the UK market, we operate both in the public and private sector, 40,000 people, and the fleet requirements for that are pretty diverse. So that would be anything to support a relatively simple facilities management van, through to complex cleaning solutions, complex building solutions. Just before I move on though, we are a very people-orientated business, and we are massive in the healthcare sector, and it brings it home when 11 of our people lost their life through the fact that they work in that particular sector and was keeping hospitals clean and tidy, especially for intense deep cleans. So moving on, talking about fleet. Next button, please. I've summarised up the challenges that come to our business and the effects on fleet into 3 areas. Our customers' needs pretty much changed overnight. We closed our own buildings, and we have business uncertainty. And I hope that resonates with many of you who also probably experience some of them and many other factors. So I was going to go through each of these individually. Next button, please. So customer needs. People closed offices. That's not a surprise to everybody. People still have closed offices. People have offices working at different levels. So we had a significant volume down in relation to our customers saying they don't need the offices opening, and therefore all the services associated with such offices. However, deep cleaning solutions went up massively because people changed the way they wanted to clean their environments, whether that be an office or a hospital. The healthcare sector went into overdrive in relation to cleaning services. Our patient transfer service business was down because hospitals were operating differently in the marketplace. Therefore, there was actually less people to transfer to and from on a non-emergency patient transport business. Another part of our business is food. So where we look after an office, where we look after a hospital, we often do the food services in relation to those things, and volumes were down. So net, what did that mean for us in the fleet world? Our vehicle volume usage was actually up, and the particular challenge we had was we had to introduce new standard operating practices and new ways of working in terms of single man working in vans. And I know that would resonate with a lot of people on the calls, that you had to work safely within your own van environment. On our own offices, if you could click the button, please. 95% of our people went home working. What that pretty much meant was we just operated skeleton staff at core office locations. Again, some people might have gone 100%, some people might have gone less than that, but 95% of our people went home working. We also entered a period of churn of managers as we were taking the cost base out through the year. And also there was a churn of frontline. And just to put in perspective, our average churn rate on frontline is about a third of people annually. What did it mean for me in fleet? Company car mileage was down significantly. Now that presents a challenge in that means you've got people paying for a company car and not really able to use it. So people actually were considering whether it was value to have a company car along the way. And the challenge going forward is not necessarily returning to the mileage levels that you were previously experiencing. And another unintended outcome, and a positive one, is our accident volumes were down significantly. And in actual fact, the number of rear end accidents, so where we hit third party from rear end, it was the first time it ever got knocked off being number one on the list. What we still have though is business uncertainty. Cash preservation for us as a business is key. COVID has refocused our business strategy around what sectors we want to operate in and what sectors we don't. And therefore it has absolutely now started to crystallise that on a global level, but also in the UK over the coming quarter, what sector exits we may have. So we don't necessarily want to operate in all the spaces that we previously were in. And just to add on top of the COVID problem, it's fair to say we had a very bad malware attack on the business dating back in February 2020, which put our business into a significant lockdown mode relative to our IT for a short time. What did it mean for fleet? We have absolutely extended lease periods, and therefore we've got that as an ongoing issue to deal with. Because we got some sector exits, we've been looking to short-term solutions along the way. The car churn has probably been one of the most critical things we've had to manage from our people's perspective, because we have actually had to tell a lot of our management population, both in the front line, in middle management, that we have to reuse assets. If people are leaving the business, we have to reuse assets, and therefore we've spent a lot of time churning our car fleet and reallocating it across our business. So they're the key challenges that landed on my doorstep relative to fleet in relation to COVID, but we still are sitting with a lot of ongoing challenges in this space. Next slide, please. And another click, thank you. So in relation to fleet and our people, I know we've been delayed another 4 weeks in England. I know that's different if you are joining us from Scotland, and I don't think Wales have announced yet, but returning to driving safely as we exit lockdown, that stat of a third accident reduction we are trying to make stick in our business. So we already have a program of activity, and I think it's something others may want to consider if they haven't already done so, a program of activity of comms to get people back to work safe, and that's both the vehicle and the individual, okay, because people may not have driven much in the last 12 months. We're using our own people in getting those messages out. I am genuinely lucky in that I have a colleague who had a very personal incident in relation to a road traffic accident where he lost a very close member of his family, who is openly willing to share what that means to them as an individual and not having that individual around anymore. They are absolutely a beacon for using in our business to make sure it focuses everybody's mind around road safety. Not everybody would want to be such a beacon, but there may be people in your own organisation that can really be deemed to be that beacon and safety advocate through personal experience, and we're absolutely using that facility in ISS. So we are absolutely though testing our ability to keep a third of accidents out of the loop on an ongoing basis. The second thing in relation to our people, technology has been embraced, and we do not want to go back to pre-COVID levels for our car fleet in terms of its usage. So as I said, we were down about 60%. We do not want to go back to where we were before. The technology platforms have stood up through this period. The integration of fleet and travel is also happening in our business, because that was another clear outcome of COVID, that fleet and travel do go together. So travel responsibility has also fallen within the fleet domain over the last month. But we are actually permanently trying to use technology to reduce travel. And for our people, we have got to live with the effects that we have an older fleet for the next 12 to 18 months. That will run its course and will correct itself over that window, but slightly older fleet comes with slightly more responsibility in terms of MOT compliance, in terms of making sure it's a fit for purpose vehicle every day. It comes with some extra lease conditions potentially around, bad maintenance or bad accident events when a vehicle's in an informal or informal extension. So everybody should just keep your eyes on that. For our business, risk management. If you haven't already been asked, you will be asked, how do you professionally risk assess all of the supply chains that come in and support the delivery of a fleet management service to your customers? Some of us would have taken quick decisions during the COVID window to make sure we have continuity of supply. However, continuity planning and risk management assessment using formal techniques around likelihood, impact, whether you can manage, mitigate, avoid, or just accept, the businesses will probably ask you to make sure such assessments are done on your fleet supply chain. And if your business is not asking that, I'm pretty sure your customers are going to ask it for a tender process, because making sure everybody is better equipped to deal with such situations better and quicker in the future is going to become part of a more integral part of assessment of bids. For our business, I'm going to talk about the market in a minute. I do feel there is probably price point risk creeping through the supply chain. Genuinely, that's because there are a few factors coming in. One, we've got general inflation, but two, people have not been able to make as much money. They've had to maybe shore up their finances in the short term, and there is risk therefore coming through on price point. And our business has to live with COVID permanently. The way people will use offices and will use hospitals in the future will be different on a permanent basis. And therefore, the solutions that we operate as a business will absolutely need to be different to meet the needs of that market going forward. So that might mean different vehicle solutions to support some of that. You would probably need some sort of rapid response capability within those solutions, more so than we've historically had. So our business globally is about making sure workplaces work well for the people in it. And therefore we have that as a challenge on an ongoing basis. And finally, for fleet and in relation to industry, I've put a generic box in about there's a bit of a log jam in manufacturing, and I think this is an issue that many people will be right now. It is certainly something we've discussed on Fleet News conferences. No one's been immune to COVID, and therefore manufacturing environments maybe still are restricted on the volumetric output they can deliver because of COVID restrictions. That's combined with the fact that people haven't necessarily ordered as much vehicle product over the last year. And then when you combine that with the downturn in build last year and microchip shortage in the automotive sector, there's a combination of factors coming through right now that means there's a bit of a logjam on manufacturing going right on. And that logjam, I think, is going to be a continuing challenge for both fleet managers, but also fleet management and leasing companies, but also the manufacturing teams themselves. And it's probably not going to be a short-term solution. And that's whilst that's Duncan Webb's view, I think that's probably well accepted that there's going to be an ongoing challenge in this space. There is backed up, pent up demand to order both cars and vans, especially around clean vehicles. Many of us have taken the opportunity to look at strategy along the way. So, you know, when we're going back into ordering, I know in ISS, we will be launching a new car policy soon, and that will probably involve the, that people can't reorder fossil fuel vehicles. It is hybrid or EV only. And on the van front, super deductions are really going to start to come into play. So on top of the fact that there might be a bit of a logjam, the fact super deductions from a taxation perspective were announced not long ago. Those super deductions are only going to be with us for a couple of years, and therefore it is in the financial interests of many businesses to make use of those super deductions between now and March 2023. So that whole build sector, I think, is really going to be quite a volumetrically increasing space, but it's a bit of a logjam at the moment. And then you compound that in that, you know, if there's not enough vehicles coming into the second-hand market, prices are up and second-hand values are really strong right across the piece right now. So that logjam for me is probably something we'll talk about for at least 12 months. And then finally, from an industry perspective, we've all got to live with the outcomes of COVID. I think we've reacted very positively. I think it's amazing to see that people will be recognised for that contribution through a specific awards over the coming months as well. But it has been a a unique challenge. Each business is slightly different. For me, I still feel we've got 12 months of consequences, though, as a result of COVID, that is going to pan through for our industry and still affect fleet management, leasing companies and manufacturers alike. And that's it from me. Thank you very much. Back to you, Julie.
Thanks very much. Very useful. Our second presentation, Sean Atten and facilities for Windscreen. Like Duncan, will be sharing his experiences and challenges he's facing post-COVID. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Julie. So good morning all, and thank you to AFP for inviting me to speak today. So yeah, I'm Sean Atten, Head of Fleet and Facilities for Auto Windscreens. A bit about Auto Windscreens myself. So I've got responsibility for 310 light commercial vehicles and 41 cars, and also the management of 65 service centres across the UK. Auto Windscreens are one of the largest repair and replacement companies, and I'm in a bit of a unique position that, as well as managing a fleet, I'm also part of a company that is a fleet supplier as well, which has helped in decision making throughout COVID. I'm sure COVID has affected fleets and businesses in many different ways, and I just want to spend the next 15 or so minutes sharing issues faced by myself and Auto Windscreens now we've overcome them and managed the challenges, and also what the future landscape is going to look like. Throughout the presentation, I'll be touching on my experiences with the fleet and also parts of how we've managed our change processes for our customers, and many of which were fitting for both sides. Next slide, please. So COVID came at us at pace, and decision making was key. The decisions that were made were sort of make or break whether we came out of this at the other side. The challenges faced by our fleet came thick and fast, and Auto Windscreens is a business that obviously relies heavily on the fleet to service our customers. So every decision that we made, it was key that we got it right. We had downtime on our fleet like we had never seen before, and home working became the new norm, with government advice being to stay at home. A factor to the success of many businesses is a fleet that's operated to its full potential. Clearly, having vehicles parked up was a reflection of the immediate impact of COVID, and more so on our operational fleet. So seeing technicians' vehicles parked up at home was a true impact on the downturn in demand at the start of the first lockdown. The fleet itself seen a 23% reduction in mileage, and whilst this could be seen as a positive for many fleet operators who maybe own their vehicles and resale values, for ourselves on contract hire with a pooled mileage agreement in place, we were just not being able to see the contracted mileage being used. So we had to put plans in place for that, to be able to use that contracted quota of mileage. A shift in lease cycles was required to maximise the mileage terms, but also in the anticipation of the knock-on effects of COVID. So although at the time exact detail was unknown, it was becoming evident that COVID would cause impacts on the supply of new vehicles. And I think we are now starting to begin to see that. Driver safety. So every decision that was made, it was at the forefront of my mind as how we're going to get people back into vehicles after such a long period of not driving, going back onto roads that were they look different with fewer traffic on there. We just had to get that right. So we had to make sure we put plans in place for that. And then there was the service maintenance and repair backlog. So as staff were furloughed during the first lockdown, routine maintenance and servicing was put on hold. Now, this is not an issue, or wasn't an issue for us whilst the vehicles were parked up, but when we seen a sudden demand in business following the easing of lockdowns, we had to act quickly to be able to get this routine servicing and repairs back up to speed. I made a choice when the government extended the MOT for 6 months. I made the choice to make use of that. Looking back in hindsight, it's probably not the best decision. I was protecting the staff from having to go into MOT centres, but we were then, when it came to the 6 months, we was in a queue like many fleet operators, which was causing us a bit of an issue. Next slide, please. So like many businesses, not just fleets, the pandemic brought hardship. And as a result, budgets were tightened and adjusted to reflect the change in the economic landscape. Cost savings were being asked for from senior management team to protect the business and livelihoods of all staff. And I think I think that's understandable when we're going through something that's not been experienced before, is to make sure that we cut costs wherever possible. Now, being in my position and a lot of other fleet managers, the cost savings can sometimes be looked at as cutting heads, and that's a good way to save money. And some businesses may not understand what an impact the fleet function actually has within a business. I'm in a lucky position now where the business realises the importance of the fleet function and decision making, and it's encouraging because I know that many of my peers weren't as lucky as myself to have that understanding in the senior management team. I was involved in a lot of the decision making, and the importance of a well-managed fleet was shown during the pandemic and ongoing as we still make decisions now to see what the landscape's going to look like. Another challenge for ourselves, and a big challenge that's gone on and is still going on with sort of a bit of uncertainty, is vehicle availability. So where many businesses have struggled, we all know that online shopping's become the new norm, and as a result, like commercial vehicles and property, availability has become more and more difficult for auto windscreens. I saw myself this year and last year placing orders way earlier than what I normally would, just in anticipation of the delays that were going to be coming. And then we've more recently been hit with the semiconductor issues, and the future on that is still unknown, but it is a massive challenge for us. Managing a fleet remotely and managing a team remotely. So managing a team remotely brings its usual challenges, where working from home can be seen as a bit of a novelty at the start. It starts affecting people as you move through, and months become, we're talking years now what we're going into. And it becomes challenging for people's mental health, but also managing the fleet remotely as well. Being able to see and touch and feel that fleet is a lot easier than working from home, which is where tracking and integrated solutions have come into place massively for auto windscreens. Next slide, please. So there's some of the challenges that I've spoke about. Now, how did we navigate them challenges? How did we navigate COVID? So to overcome the lease, we extended our lease cycles from 3 to 4 years. So we shifted away from our 3-year and onto a 4-year lease cycle, and it offered us a substantial cost saving, and it allowed us to use our contracted mileage quota, and that was key, to be able to use that mileage that we'd contracted for. It is showing successful now, extending our lease cycles, and it is something that we're going to continue to do as we move forward. But with them savings that we've made, what we've not done, we've invested that and made improvements to our vehicle fit out and driver safety. So we've integrated rear view cameras, we've upgraded our telematics solution, lightweight racking with anti-slip flooring, which allows us to get, all these modifications allow us to get that extra year with no effects on the core operational teams. We made use of the job retention scheme. Never a nice thing to do, but if it's explained to people, and I think it was one of the things that had to be used by many businesses to be able to come out on the other side and allow people to return to jobs. It's a tough one how we use that job retention scheme within auto windscreens. We still have customers to service, and we still had a fleet to service as well. So we managed it well, and as a result of the scheme, we managed to come through the pandemic with no job losses to our fleet operation, which was fantastic, really. Next slide, please. So regular reviews of government information. During the early stages, we had to work with a senior management team, IT, health and safety, operations, facilities, and HR to ensure that we understood what we could and couldn't do. The SMT took the decision in the early stages to temporarily close 65 strong service network. This in turn added more pressure to me managing the fleet. So we rely on our service centres to take a proportion of the work for auto windscreens. This was all now pushed on a mobile service, so the fleet became more and more important. With this, we had to ensure that we had a COVID-safe fleet. We introduced sanitisation policies, enhanced hygiene became part of daily fleet activities, digital handovers, and one person per vehicle became the new norm. This was all to protect our workforce and ensure that we could keep out there servicing our customers. So the implementations that were put in place for our fleet with the sanitisation policies, etc., they were not only used on our fleet vehicles, but also for our customers' vehicles. So 15% of work for auto windscreen replacements also requires a ADAS recalibration, which means our technicians have to drive customers' vehicles. So it was important that what we put in place for our core operational vehicles, we also mirrored that for when technicians are driving customers' vehicles. Planning, we put plans in place to ensure that customers and staff were safe throughout. With a limited workforce that we had, we needed to make sure that they were with us every day of the week, but we also needed to protect them and their families. We put additional checks to be able to prioritise key workers and get their jobs attended to quickly and keep them on the road. And that all of this stuff has been so successful that we've put in place that we've continued to do that now. So key worker checks remain in place, sanitisation policies remain in place. And from a personal view, I think that's, hygiene is going to be at the forefront of everyone's minds as we move forward and not something that's going to go away now. Communication was key, always been key. We found that quick and regular communication on our website, emails to partners and additional text messages help keep everyone safe and speed up what operational changes were made. As and when the government changed restrictions, we updated both internal and external customers, and we also updated our fleet policies to mirror what was in place or what was being put in place by the government. Keeping in regular contact with my key fleet suppliers meant that I remained at the forefront of new information. So not only did they want to know what auto windscreens were doing, I needed to know what they were doing so we could keep moving. Next slide, please. So what are we doing now? So what's the future sort of looking like? So with the fast-paced change and shift to electric vehicles and the reduced use and mileage on company cars, we're investing a lot of time now into looking at the benefits of an electric vehicle salary sacrifice scheme. The benefits to the user and the business are excellent and will in turn encourage users into electric vehicles, which fits with the Auto Windscreens Net Zero programme that's ongoing. We've understood now through this pandemic, and as Duncan touched on, vehicles not being used as much as were now. Some company car users now not seeing it as a benefit. So we need to look at something different to what we've done pre-COVID and during COVID. Fleet suppliers, we're making the most of our fleet supplier partnerships. So we've got some really good partnerships in place with our fleet suppliers, and we want to continue to get the best deals as possible. I think there needs to be an understanding on both parts from a fleet manager and a fleet supplier's point of view that we're not the only ones facing the issue and that they're going to be facing issues as well. So we need to be making sure that we're getting deals that are right for both parties so we can both prosper and come out of this together. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are we doing now? So as a business, we've seen a massive change in claims. So we have seen two areas change in the last sort of 15 months. And that one of them is when customers make a claim due to flexible home working, our peaks have changed now. So what used to be after the school run at the end of the day, there's now been a gradual rise from 9:30, which stayed at high levels till the end of the day. So our call centre is seeing a real shift in when calls are coming through to them, which has mean we've had to change the way we resource in the front offices and the call centre. And the second change we've seen is seasonal peaks in demand. So previous years, we'd have seen a rise in claims from February to June, and that would slow down in the summer. But in 2020, our peak month was September, which is unheard of for auto windscreens. For myself, these changes have benefited the way that I can manage the fleet and we can service and maintain, because we now offer different windows to complete essential work, and it's less disruption and downtime to the operation. So it's working for me from a fleet manager perspective. The digital journey. So it was an ongoing thing for us, a digital journey prior to COVID. It's something we've had to speed up and make further plans on as we've been faced with a pandemic. So we enhanced the digital journey for our fleet drivers and for our external customers, minimised touch points for drivers, and instead introduced new processes to handle what may have been paperwork based. So we've put a lot of our processes now tablet-based, app-based, and web-based. We've added text reminders to customers who call in for booking information to help reduce calls in peak times. And they can now get all this information, including live technician location on an app, as well as pay the balance of their job and amend the bookings. So everything now has become very digital for us to reduce calls coming into our contact centre and reduce touch points when the technician is on site with the customer. Site plans. So we reopened our network of 65 site service centres. Wasn't an easy task, but one that we've managed now, and they're all COVID secure with social distancing in place. So with a lot of government announcements and a lot of changes that were made week on week, opening up a 65 strong network of sites is not an easy task, but we wanted to make sure we got it right, which we have. We have a one in, one out policy, sign in with the NHS app at the QR code. And we also have large enough spaces to be able to operate safely. We're growing a business, and so our footprint is very important and key to ensuring we have enough available sites in each area for customers to travel to. And also with weather conditions, and the biggest thing for us is our ADAS recalibrations that have to be done in a site. So opening up, we have plans now to open up a lot more sites throughout the end of this year and next year. We're trying to get people back into offices, and that will be on a hybrid structure. So we're looking at different ways to do that, whether it be 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. And we understand that working at home for 18 months, 2 years, which is going to be close to by the time people come back, it's affected people's mental health. But also what can affect the mental health is asking them to come back into an office. So people have got used to what they're doing at home now. People have got used to working around family commitments, childcare commitments. So now asking them to get back into your vehicle to attend meetings, come back into the office, it's a challenge, and one we have to be wary of when with people, you know, dealing with mental health in this day and age. Next slide, please. So our journey through the pandemic has been a challenging one, but it's definitely taught me and the business a lot of lessons. Okay? So the decision making has been well informed and based on facts. So during the start of it, it was very easy to make decisions, sort of snap decisions, and they could be the wrong ones. So we took time to sit back, look at all the facts, make sure all departments were involved. And in turn, it's brought Auto Windscreen's business through the initial problems caused by the pandemic in a very strong position to continue into the future. We as a business, and I as a fleet manager, have no illusions that COVID is something that is not going away anytime soon. And in fact, lots of the changes that I've spoke about and the business have implemented are going to remain in place regardless. We'll continue to follow the latest government advice in the hope that the world can return to a little bit more normality. Next slide, please. So what's the future looking like with Auto Windscreen? So we're going to strengthen our offering to our customers. So over the next few months, the senior management team, we're looking to recruit, retain, build our staffing levels for the future. So when you come through a pandemic, to have a senior management team that are looking to grow the business is a positive when you look at the effects that it's had on a lot of other businesses out there. So we're in a really strong position to be able to grow our sites, grow our employment base as well. We're looking at all areas of the business to add value, from reducing fuel expenditure, overhead costs, increasing efficiencies, and we want to build a solid platform with effective cost centres to move us forward. So AWR on a real big growth phase, and we're seeing a 37% growth in claims since 2018. We expect year on year we'll have 21% claims this year, which is massive for us as a business. Our customer footprint will continue to rise in 2022. And as well as this, we're expecting a number of opportunities from the fleet and HGV market. The environmental impacts and challenges. So a big thing for us we're aiming towards as a business, Auto Windscreens, is net zero. So we're looking to add a lot more meat on the bones over the next couple of years to this. We're looking at ways we expend our energy, where we source our energy, increase our own charging infrastructure, electrify the fleet, which I think is a big topic now, and a lot of fleet managers are sort of getting involved in. How do we do that? And then look at the locations and make improvements to our sort of lighting, heating. Do we have sites in the right locations? So there's a lot going on now in the next couple of years on our plan to become net zero. As supply chain, as well as our own footprint, we want to ensure that our supply chain are doing everything that we're doing to help us on our journey towards net zero, to help us out of the impacts that COVID's had. So we'll be looking for them to become more efficient, reduce the impact they're having on the environment, and make sure they're understanding our needs and the needs of themselves. Okay, and that's me. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Sean. That was really interesting. I'd like to start the Q&A session now. We've had a number of questions from members. I'll kick off with the first question. If there was one piece of advice you could give your pre-COVID you, what would it be? Duncan?
Better contingency planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly felt you build a supply chain, and those supply chains in themselves have sub-supply chains. Some of them extending into global organisations, and contingency planning was always on tomorrow's list to do. And I just don't think that's how I will personally look at that going forward.
Sean, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's listening to other departments, internal and external, really. So pre-COVID, I seen fleet as being fleet as my little department. When in fact, when it comes to going through a pandemic, there's a lot more people that need to be involved to make the fleet successful. So health and safety, HR, operations. So yeah, listen to what people have got to say for me. And that's something that I've continued to do throughout, and will definitely take input as we move forward.
A second question that we've been asked, I know you touched on it in your presentations, but do you think your mileage will ever go back to normal, whatever that is or was?
So,
Duncan? Or Sean, sorry, go on, Sean.
In the core operational fleet, so our light commercial vehicle fleet, then yes, that's gonna sort of exceed what we was doing pre-COVID and during COVID. The car fleet, no. I can see that as we use technology, so Zoom calls, team calls, we're gonna not have a need to go to them meetings that will, in fact, we're traveling three hours to have a meeting for 20 minutes. That can be done now. So yeah, making use of technology, I can never see the car fleet going to the mileages that they were doing before.
Yeah, for us, van fleet mileage, I think is up. If I'm being honest, and I think that's probably a stick. On cars, I would be disappointed if we didn't keep at least half of the reduction as a permanency in our business. And I have certainly heard from our country leadership team down a real advocacy that they don't want to put people back on the road. Quite frankly, the tech has been proven to be satisfactory in many business situations. So use it and cut out all the risks that go for it. And we've actually looked at our own car leasing, and we will be leasing vehicles on a lower mileage principle going forward.
Yeah, we've got a question that's linked to that. What impact will Teams and Zooms have on the business moving forward? So you've both said it will have quite an impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. It's almost like you had Excel, you had Word, you had PowerPoint, didn't you? And Teams has been added to the end of the list, and it's probably the one we probably use more often in the day than not. And if everybody was honest with themselves, if you read around 18 months, did you use Teams or did you use Skype the way we do now? The way people do business has changed.
Yeah.
I think the substantial cost saving as well. So when we look at the mileage reduction and the travel of people, the cost savings are, by using this technology is fantastic.
Yeah, it certainly is.
For me, it's not just cost. If you think about road risk, and if you think about people's lives, okay, you're giving so much back. It's not just about the money that comes with it. You're actually giving a valuable commodity quite often back to the individual, and being time.
Yeah, we'll go on to mobility now. Will you look at shared mobility solutions in the short term, such as lift share, car club, pooled vehicles? Duncan, do you want to answer that one first?
So we are already picking off sort of the easier end. So where people want a hire vehicle, the aggregation of hire into the fleet journey is already in place. I'm honest with you. I think we're still struggling with shared vehicles from a mobility perspective. just the cost of getting a vehicle from point A to point B to ensure that happens can be more than the cost you avoid in the first place. And opening up a car pool requires a lot of thought, because it's more than just about avoiding some costs. There is a whole bunch of new risks you take on by aggregating car pools, in particular, not so much van pools. It can be quite a tough thing to prove relative to HMRC regs in particular. So I think my personal view is, I think the jury's still out for me on how far you can really integrate mobility. Certainly when solutions including public transport start to become a product that's off the shelf, okay, I then think there's a real possibility of doing something different to what we currently enjoy.
Yeah, Sean, your thoughts?
Yeah, so the short-term leases or hire on our commercial vehicles is sort of, we're in a position where the vans are unique and kitted out for the carrying of windscreens and wet weather canopies. So we've never been able to make use of that. We just can't satisfy the needs of the technicians with a hire van. But the cars, we do make use of daily rentals, and we have been doing that throughout the pandemic. But car sharing is still a no-go for us, just with COVID and restrictions that are in place. So we steer away, and it's still a one person per vehicle policy. Moving forward into the future, yes, who knows what that may look like. We have area managers or senior managers around the business that don't see a company car as a benefit anymore. So what do we do differently for them people, and whether that be public transport passes, tube passes, etc. So it's something that we've been looking at for a while now.
Yeah, still on the subject of mobility, Duncan, I'd be interested in your view on this. Would employees be approaching you and saying, I'm going to London, should I travel by train or car? What sort of advice would you give if approached?
Don't travel.
Don't travel. Yeah.
Assess whether you need to travel in the first place, and if you genuinely do, okay, make the best choice. Make the best choice for you within a range of criteria. Okay. It might sound counterintuitive, but going first thing in the morning, okay, it might be better for someone to go last thing at night and buy a cheap train ticket and have a lovely hotel stay overnight somewhere and be nice and fresh in the morning. And that might be cheaper than the early morning train ticket. Okay. I don't think you can. I think you can standardise some of the policy controls, but at the end of the day, if people need to travel, you've got to trust them to be sensible and responsible about doing that. But for me, it wouldn't just be about the lowest price point. Is think innovatively about how you can make that work.
Yeah. You got anything to add, Sean?
Yeah, I can just echo what Duncan said on that one. Really, it's not down. I don't think anyone can advise, and it is down to individuals to make their own decision and make sure it's the right one. But I think what we need to look at as a business or businesses out there is, what have you done for the past 18 months, 2 years? Why all of a sudden, when restrictions lift, do you need to travel? So I think it's having policies and restraints in place to make sure that that doesn't open the floodgates as soon as we're allowed to travel. And questions need to be asked: what have you done in the past, or for the past sort of time frame?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all the questions I've got. James, have you got any more?
Thanks, Julie. Yeah. Interestingly, one of the questions that's come up is around vehicle policy selection with regards to term and mileage. You mentioned there's a reduction in vehicle mileage, but have you had to look at your vehicle policy in regards to sort of allowances and benchmarking in regards to term and mileage considerations, Duncan?
So term, yes, okay, because we've stretched leases anyway, James. Therefore, I think we will formalise the fact that we'll probably align more with the market on our car leases terms. Yeah. Mileage is down. We don't need to contract as much mileage. That's just fact. Okay, that's absolutely fact. On our van leases, we are probably taken a slightly different business approach because a lot of our customer head contracts might be for 3, 4, 5 year windows. Our commercial fleet might have had a lot of variability around it in terms of the lease periods that we went for. What COVID has absolutely driven is, as I've gone through that business change that I've been talking about, we've been deciding what markets we're going to be in, what markets we're not going to be in, and contracts and stuff. The reallocation of assets from one division to another and the whole standardization of the fleet is very much a journey we are on now. Okay, so that I can get better uniformity around hitting a TCO low point on the vans. Okay, whereas at the moment I'd describe it as it's a bit variable, James. Okay, but in actual fact, if you do the right business things, so it's almost a back to basics of what safety equipment is mandatory on a vehicle, what logos are mandatory on a vehicle, what's the technical requirements of the staff relative to a vehicle. If you can get to a commonality of baseline, okay, your reusability factors just go through the roof over the long run, and that then gives you the ability to regularize your van leases. But it's horses for courses. For us, it's 5 years we're thinking for a van right now.
Yeah, we're seeing that quite often as well. And Sean, have you got similar situation?
Yeah, so changing from the 3 years, which was typical for windscreens, up to the 4 year lease cycles, and changing our mileage to suit is meaning that we're sort of being able to use our mileage quota up. But we've also started looking at more area specific now. So whereas it was a set mileage and term across the country, we've now seen that due to work demands, the mileage changes and differs in each area. So we now do that specific to make sure that we're really maximising that pooled mileage quota.
We have one last question. I'll make it the last one that's just coming through. With the longer lead times, does that mean you're keeping drivers in high CO2 cars for longer, and will you compensate them for the additional benefit in kind that they have to pay as they can't get into an EV? Duncan?
Great question. It's a fact, and it's a very valid fact. Okay. Unfortunately, I think we would take the view in ISS is personal tax is personal tax. The company car you chose at that time, you knew what that was from an outlook perspective, and unfortunately, yes, that lag might mean you have a personal taxation implication for a long run. For a longer run than you would have. We are, like I say, we're redesigning the scheme so that in theory, no one can repeat that mistake. You will only be able to get a hybrid or an EV. So, and we're encouraging absolutely everybody, it's EV. It will be EV first, okay, hybrid if you can't. And that really is only a range anxiety sort of issue in some of those. So, I know it's still a bit Jan tomorrow, but I think if you start to sit in someone's shoes and try and compensate them as a business, I think you're on a challenging wicket on many fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're in a lucky position that sort of 40% of our cars are hybrid or electric at this moment in time. But yeah, recompensating people for personal taxes is not something we'll be going down the route of. And I think it gets very complicated when you start doing things like that. But yeah, our next lease cycle for people that are not already in electric or hybrid vehicles, it is a must that's what their choice is. So, and that's as we push forward onto our net zero.
Well, thank you both very much for your input. I'd now like to hand over to Paul Hollick, who will detail AFP's current range of activities and campaigns, explaining how members can access this information and importantly gain help and support. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks Sean and Duncan for their excellent presentations as well. So I'd just like to spend 10 minutes just running through with everybody on this webinar the outputs from some of the AFP committees, the activities that we're addressing at the moment on behalf of our members in the industry. So James, if you can just press the button on the first slide. So we've got 5 committees, as most people will know on this webinar. So the first one up here is the EV, alt fuels and low carbon committee. We've got about 17 members on this committee. And they have already, in terms of their outputs, they have already completed a set of 3 documents that are available on our AFP website free of charge to members and non-members. These are fleet policy amendments for electric vehicles. So just some clauses that you guys can put into your fleet policies when you are adopting electric vehicles. Hints and tips for deployment. This is written, you got to remember these guys have been written by fleet managers, for fleet managers. So hints and tips for policy deployment and how to deploy electric vehicles within your fleet. And then some employee communication guides, just some stuff that you can cannibalize to send out to your employees about how electric vehicles work, some of those myth busters that they might even think that EVs do or don't do. It's a great document to be able to just lift and shift directly out as a piece of employee communication to your own employees internally. The committee is now focusing on looking at curbside adequacy for those without driveways, which seems to be a big problem for those that are very progressed on EV deployment. And also, we are just in the process of creating a short document about the MOT requirements that we believe are needed for electric vehicles. Just to rank some of the issues that the EV committee seem to think are the burning issues within the industry on EV deployment. And if I go from number 10 up to number 1, so number 10 is just the quick changes on the EV grants. Obviously, for a lot of us, that's a problem. We've got vehicles in bands, we've got vehicles in categories for employees. If these grants get changed overnight, then suddenly these vehicles can just drop out, which makes a problem for us at the moment. Now, will it change? Probably not, if I'm honest. But again, we're just doing a little bit in terms of our share of voice about the fact that it is causing us issues when we're running national fleets. The fact that super deductions aren't available to leasing is a bit of a problem as well. If they were on EVs, on cars and vans, then obviously the lease rates would be cheaper. At the moment, super deductions are only available on vans, not on cars, but on vans that you purchase rather than lease, which is a shame. Availability lead times on cars. Now, maybe since we wrote this 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe this has gone higher up the list. But again, that's a problem for us at the moment in terms of just lead times on availability. EV, number 7 is EV highway payments, not yet frictionless or contactless. So this is the fact that a lot of the UK EV infrastructure on the roads you have to sign up for. And for us running national fleets, we just really want to be able to pay from a contactless perspective or with an RFID card or something like that. Number 6 is EV AER reimbursement rates, and the fact that 4P just doesn't cut the mustard with a lot of vehicles, and I'll talk about that in a later slide. We've got EV highway functionality. A lot of the charging infrastructure is not working or not fit for purpose. Number 4 is that we've still got no BIK tax tables beyond 24-25, and the leases that are going to go out in the next 12 months will hit 25-26 tax year. 2 and 3 are all van related. Number 3 is whole life costs on larger commercial vehicles and ranges. At the moment with the price points, it's difficult to get a whole life cost analysis on bigger vans into position where they're better from a whole life cost perspective than the equivalent diesel or petrol. And obviously on vans, range and availability, particularly on the bigger vehicles, is a problem. And number 1, as I mentioned earlier, is curbside charging and how to, for those guys and girls that don't have access to home charging infrastructure, how do we actually make that a viable option for them to take an EV and they can run it sustainably? So they're the top 10 challenges coming out of the EV committee. James, if you can kindly go to the next slide. In terms of the Future Mobility Steering Committee, they have just finished up the tax manifesto, which was released about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Hopefully you can have all seen that in the marketplace. And they also finished up the definition of what mobility and mobility management means to a fleet operator. Now the committee is creating a relatively comprehensive guide on how to deploy a mobility solution within your organisation. We think this is going to be a great guide. We're really looking forward to it. There's been a load of work done on this at the moment, load of debate. It's nearly there. I would predict that it'll probably be issued in the market to members probably the next 4 to 5 weeks. I saw some questions today from the audience on travel and payments against fleet. And again, this is where the industry is heading. So we want to make sure that we are keeping our members abreast of all this, and we're early adopters in this space. We've been lucky enough for the committee to be joined by Ryan Coles from Aviva and David Landy from Hermes. And sadly, Joe Carrera from MSD is now retired, so he stepped down from the committee. Okay, James, next slide. Future Roads, they've been doing a load of work on clean air zone guides, which again is in the printers at the moment, ready to be released in the coming weeks. They're now looking at adequacy of EV payment solutions on the EV highway and the charging network across the country. So again, that's going to be quite interesting work that those guys are up to. James, next slide. The LCV committee have done a load of work looking at telematics and looking at how you get better insights from telemetry systems rather than just data flowing out of them. And so they've done a lot of work on that. There should be some guys released shortly. And now they're moving on to eLCVs, where they're looking at producing 3 guides in a similar ilk to what we've already released for the cars. That is instant tips for deployment, driver communications, and policy amendments for eVans. David Fisher from Virgin Media joins the team. Risk, compliance and health. They've just released, completed 2 guides, one on grey fleet management and managing the driver business journey. And now going to start focusing on LCV risk diligence within your own commercial vehicle fleet. And also they're looking at the AUX scenarios, the automated lane keeping systems, and the impact on technology on the highway code, as we're starting to see the highway code, the government already starting to make some amends or some proposed amends around the highway code around automated vehicles. And we need to make sure that we share our view with the government as quickly as we can. So that's the 5 committees. You might have seen in the marketplace, we've gone out and we're doing some lobbying jointly with the BVRLA around the advisory electric rate. As we know, 4p's fine for some vehicles, but it doesn't cut it for particularly the newer generation of EVs. So we've got some real concerns from our members around the adequacy of the AER rate in terms of 4 pence per mile across the board, cars, vans, whatever the range of the battery, whatever the size of the battery, it's 4p. It just doesn't work. The old generation, the i3s, the Leafs do, for sure, but the newer stuff with the longer ranges doesn't. We've done a lot of work. If anybody ever wants to see the work we've done in terms of mapping all the vehicles out with their actual cost per miles, please get in touch. Our website is the www.theafp.co.uk, or you can reach us at administration@theafp.co.uk. But we want the revenue to review the AER rate based on the figures that we've provided. We were very successful as ACFO before we rebranded as the AFP quite a few years ago now, or 4 years ago, to get the AER rate actually launched. So what we're trying to do now is we do have the ear of HMRC in the government. So we are hoping, I mean, it's not going to be a short-term move, but we're hoping that hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to get some movement from HMRC on this topic. We also, a bit like AFR, we want periodic review quarterly to make sure that they're being reviewed. We also want LCVs to be actually defined and probably with a different category, because again, when they're laden, when they need to be charged up 9-10 hours a night, they're just not going to achieve 4p a mile. And obviously, while we're at it, we may as well ask for hydrogen as well, because that's coming up. I know that the vast majority of our members aren't running any hydrogen vehicles at the moment, but we need to be cognizant that this coming, particularly for the bigger vans, and we need HMRC to be recognising that hydrogen will be needed to be reimbursed to employees as well. James, next slide. So beyond that great work that we're doing there, I just wanted to highlight some of the documents that we've got for members. We are building the members area quickly and more robustly, but at the moment we've got available to members, we've got EV guides for cars, which I mentioned, three documents, and in addition to that, it's only available to members. We've got the employee declaration form as well, which employees can sign, or you guys can use for your employees to sign to make sure that they understand their responsibilities around running an electric vehicle. We've got definition of mobility and mobility management. We've got a generic fleet policy, which has been designed by our members, by the committee members, that again can be used by our members to help them shape their fleet policy if they've got any concerns about their current fleet policy. We've got the best practice to manage the driver business journeys. We've got the grey fleet vehicle definition, facts and myths. We've got the tax manifesto, and we've got our state of the nation. We've got coming up, we've got the LCV guides, we've got the Clean Air Zone guide, we've got the Insight Not Data guide, and how to deploy mobility services. So this is all going to be happening in the next 4 to 6 weeks before the summer month, well, before August anyway. So again, some exciting documents are available for our members soon. James, next slide. And then just my last slide is, you know, we can't do this without your support. We are working, we are not for profit. The guys on this call give our time freely. We do have our training academy, of course, and we're running training courses. So I would encourage everybody to be getting their skills up to date and getting on some training courses with the AFP Training Academy, the ICFM. But membership for fleet operators starts at £99 a year. For fleet service support, it starts at £2.99 a year. We really need your support, so please sign up, join us, get involved, start to add some value to what we're trying to do, what we are doing as well. And also the training courses are important as well. So the next electric vehicle training course runs at the end of the month. The class-based courses for our Fleet Academy will start commencing from September. We have our online courses as well, so please check them out on our website. Everything is on our website, www.theafp.co.uk. Please get on it and have a look. Thanks very much. I'll hand back to Julie.
Thanks, Paul. We will, as I mentioned earlier, be including the webinar recording into the AFP website for future member reference. So feel free to log on and investigate what's available. And as Paul quite rightly said, that's being developed as we speak. Okay, I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking Duncan and Sean once again for your support today. And lastly, advise of our next webinar. It's going to be held on Wednesday, the 14th of July, starting at the same time, 9:30. This time we'll be looking at how we get started on the mobility journey. So should be quite a topical and interesting one based on the questions we've received today. So it leaves me just to thank you all once again for your time this morning and look forward to you joining us in July for our next webinar. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.